Hello, I'm Jo,
I'm Steve.
and we just wanted to talk to you briefly about the project that we're planning in France over the next couple of years, having already been doing similar work for more than 20 years in the same area. So we are not builders or historic building conservation people or antiques people. We essentially are London people who have worked in and around media for many years. Most of what we've done in France has been funded by my writing and also the small businesses that we've run, which were publishing businesses, media businesses, and running events around the world. But we have come to love our time in France and we've decided to do even more of it. And so even though we are based in London or near London, we spend a lot of time going backwards and forwards to France. And Steve has got massive plans for the next project.
Yeah, and so we'd like to introduce you to the place where we are now, and then we'll show you what the new place looks like. So on we go. About 20 years ago, Jo and I came down this road, having made an appointment with the estate agent to see a house that we'd seen online. The house was so cheap and ramshackle that the estate agent didn't even bother to turn up. But when we got here, it didn't look like this. The front garden was probably waist height in brambles, and after struggling through, I got to the front door, went inside, took a couple of photos, came back, sat in the car, and Jo and I agreed that what the hell, we'd just go for it. So the front right corner that you can see there, top right corner, that was falling into the garden. Dormers weren't there. The back roof was mostly missing, and there was an awful lot of rot on some of the roof trusses, and a lot of work needed to be done. But when I'd got inside, I thought, there is something interesting about this place. So we paid for it, started doing work. The room that I'd got into was the farmer's living space. And the first thing that I saw was this fireplace, albeit painted white. And the corner over there was coated in moss, algae, whatever. It was in a pretty poor state, but it looked interesting. So since then, we came over on the Friday night ferry, worked like crazy for Saturday and most of Sunday, and then whizzed back on the Sunday afternoon ferry, be back at work for Monday. We did that for probably a couple of times a month for the first few years, and that's how long it took to get the work done that we could do. We had a stonemason who worked on Wells Cathedral, who was escaping England and in France doing work, and he did the repointing work outside and the rebuilding of the front, and reset the top of that fire surround on new lime mortar pointing. Either side of the fireplace there was lime plaster, which the boys hacked off and Jo and the boys repointed. And that's also behind that large sideboard over there at the back. That wall is the north wall, and it's quite traditional in older farms to not have windows or doors on the north wall, because that's the cold wall. So that wall has got insulation, battening and fake panelling on it. The central wall separating the farmer's dwelling side and the barn on the other side, which is through there. That central wall is coated on this side with lime mortar, lime putty, all done by hand. Joe and the boys did that. Lots of fun. And the doorway through there used to have an oak plank door. There we go. So it used to have an oak plank door in there, which was repurposed as a table with Singer sewing machine treadles underneath. So you can sit at that, eat your dinner, treadle away to your heart's content to work off those calories from all the Normandy cheese, cream, Calvados. A nice Œil de Bœuf clock there from a brocante. The original mechanism is sitting on a table in England whilst I try and figure out how on earth to fix it, and that's just a simple quartz movement in there. Shouldn't really do that, but anyway. But as you can see, it's a good-sized room with this rather special fireplace. And you can see the carvings on the fireplace up there. It's very, very likely that this was repurposed, stolen, whatever, from the rubble of a chateau or a monastery or something. Quite commonplace to do that. So this rustic old farmhouse didn't warrant a fireplace of that quality. So they just basically reused some old stone to create what you see here. And on the left there, the carving is probably a Breton ermine, and on the right, it's probably the French fleur de lis. So there's every probability that the original house, chateau that this came from was probably the result of a marriage of somebody from Brittany and somebody from France, because they were separate countries at that point, or separately ruled. So plasterboarded front to keep the outside walls insulated. And then through to what's now the kitchen, you've got a rather glorious silk curtain there, which we picked up. We picked up the material when we were doing a conference in Shanghai. Stacks of goodies to take home to England. And as you can see, it's a very simple IKEA kitchen thrown in, or IKEA if you prefer, thrown together just for simplicity purposes. The next house will have more older furniture used as kitchen furniture, but we've just brought over some of our older washing machine and dryer to use over here, and another one of those silk curtains, local fridge, and a little island for storage and breakfasting and whatever. This side again, you have repointing by Joe and the boys in traditional lime. And the other side of the central wall that you can see here, on this side, it's plasterboarded with an air gap behind it to allow a little bit of the moisture that wicks up that wall to be evaporated off. A little plasterboard wall there separating on the other side the stairs, and under the stairs a toilet. Excuse the mirror. If you go into the toilet and then turn right, you have our wine cellar underneath the stairs. So the back wall here, again, repointed and plastered over in a rustic style by Joe and the boys. And up above, yes, it is actually a bicycle wheel with glass yogurt pots. A little bit of a homemade project until we find something more attractive to put up there. But anyway, lots and lots of copper from Vieux-de-la-Puelle, just north of us here. We bought those probably 15 years ago, when copper was quite a lot cheaper. Horrendously expensive now. Those are all Mobile. And again, plasterboarded front wall with some insulation behind it. Curtains over the windows or doors to try and keep the heat in. And that's the ground floor of where we live at the moment. We've been here for 20 years. It took a good 5-6 years for us to do the work, as we were doing it rather fits and starts, weekends here and there. But it gives you an idea of what we've achieved so far. I mean, this living room stroke dining room serves us extremely well. The big go down there wood burner that will heat up the room in 45 minutes, and it'll keep it nice and toasty. It's a 9 kilowatt. The furniture that we've picked up so far, the bonnetiere in the corner on the right there, large cupboard. And on the left, you've got that sideboard. Those are all just brocante finds. The table that you can see in the middle here, that's from an auction in England. It was in a very, very sorry state. And I might dare to say that I stripped it and French polished it, but in reality, I just threw a lot of chemicals and shellac to the top. It's just a project after watching a few YouTube videos. But that's us. That's from where we're starting. We thought about this house again with a view to retirement. And we decided that there wasn't quite enough space in here for hobbies and things that we would want to do. This is fine for just sleeping, eating, and sitting down and watching TV, but it doesn't really have an awful lot of extra space. So probably about 10 years ago, we started looking around for other places that might suit the hobby need. Initially, we started looking at barns close by, just thinking we would keep this place and buy a barn just to do hobby work. Saw a few places, didn't see anything that was absolutely right. About 8 years ago, we saw what we refer to as the Buffalo Farm. It didn't initially click. It didn't initially make sense of how you would parcel it up. But we kept on going back and looking at it, and it kept on being on the market. Then it disappeared from the market during the pandemic, but reappeared summer of last year, at which point we just said, what the hell, and put in an offer, and we now own it. So that is the property that will be retirement home after I've renovated it. I say after we've renovated it. But that gives you an idea of what we're starting from, and we'll show you what we're going to after I've had some lunch. Well, here we have the Buffalo Farm. At the far end in this picture is a newer building which forms the furthest end of this longère, this long building. The new building is attached to the barn in the centre, which is behind that red door, and at this end is the old dwelling. And then around the corner at right angles to the left on the side there is a colombage barn. Now, we signed for this in December 2023, and the lady who sold it to us, her family's been living in it since the 1920s. Originally, it was 2 plots, and on the French cadastre, which is their equivalent of the land registry, if we look at a plan, you can see there are 2 plots. One plot is the lean-to at the far end and the new house as well as the barn, and the other plot is the old house at the end of the Longère and the colombage barn. Her family bought the second plot, which is the colombage barn and the old house, and combined it to form one large property. So going past the lean-to, there's the front door to the new end of the Longère. Nobody's lived in there for more than 30 years. Then we get to the big red door which goes into the barn in the middle. That's a huge opening, and that will probably be a very large window, possibly a bifold door. Lots of ivy hiding Christ knows what underneath. And then that's the old house at the far end of the Longère. As you can see, there's 2 doors in there and 2 boarded up windows upstairs. Well, they're sort of shutters. Then you've got the end wall, which has got a slight bow on it, but nothing really to worry about. A lean-to, which is on the colombage barn, and you can see colombage on this end. There's also colombage on the right-hand side wall. This left-hand side wall is all wood, and the furthest wall that you can't see is stone. So we're back at the end wall again. Lots of repointing for me to do. That's about 8 meters tall, so big scaffolding tower for that. The front wall, the repoint or the pointing is adequate, but we'll see what happens with that once the ivy gets taken off. There's Joe's shadow, and you can see some tin on the floor there, corrugated iron, which covers up the old septic tank, and a bush next to the septic tank. So the septic tank's going to have to be collapsed and filled in with rubble, past some hips on a bush, and yet more shrubbery and foliage to the lean-to at the far end of the new building, with a bit of a loading bank up the top there, and a hay box there, and a walkway up to the garden, and a pig pen up at the far end there. And that's the lean-to. So there you have it. That's the Buffalo Farm, our new project. We don't live in France full time. I'll be coming back and forth between the UK and France, doing work and coming back to the UK to edit. Being as this is YouTube, it would be really helpful if you could subscribe. And if you hit that notification bell, then you'll be notified when we send up new videos. So next time you can join us and we'll start work on the outside of the property.